Welcome back. We're joined now by Stephanie Atkinson. She is founder and CEO of Compass Intelligence. Stephanie, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Our topic today is the connected workforce. And Stephanie, I think that bring your own device is pretty much the new normal now for some of the smaller, fastest growing companies in this economy. And the way that companies provision mobile devices that workers bring into the workplace may be different from one to the next. But what about mobile security? Is that becoming more standardized from one workplace to the next, or is that equally disparate?
It is, and actually what we've seen is over the past few years, BYOD was really a big driving factor account and new bit of a surge in corporate libel contracts, and this is all driven around the need to standardize security. So I think you'll find that a lot of your IT departments moving out to the CIO and CTO are really thinking much more serious in the past around securing not just their network, but the mobile devices that are becoming very common in terms of how we do business today.
So what are some of the most exciting trends you're seeing in mobile security for 2016?
Well, primarily, we're starting to see just an influx of, various applications and software that we're able to use on our devices, whether it's biometrics driven or RFID driven or token key and other ways that we're using security and software, and including passwords. Biometrics is definitely a big thing that we've seen over the past few years, but we're starting to see other ways to log in and to secure our transactions. So some things are becoming much more automated. You'll also find that there may be things that are driven around the IoT sector that are utilizing automation and sensor technology to secure our communications and utilize our smartphone as the driving tool into logging into systems and other things.
So do you see a lot of workplace environments where the smartphone is the way to log in to the wider network? I know here where we work, we use it for our security to actually enter the building. Is that type of automation becoming more common?
It is becoming common, and I think as you start to see automation across workforce facilities and intelligent buildings, access control, lighting control, there's so many things that will be connected. And the smartphone is just a tool to allow us to, interface with all those connected devices. So it definitely is a driving factor. The smartphone is just another interface for us to manage that high-end communications.
So we hear a lot about the smartphone as the gateway to the connected home, but it sounds like you're also seeing it as the gateway to a connected workplace as well.
Yeah, correct. As we, continue to automate operations, the back end as well as the big thing this year will be really around automating things that really enhance the customer experience. So whether you're a retailer, a manufacturing facility, or you're in public safety or in the government sector, the smartphone is definitely a driving factor. We're going to see a whole host of mobile applications that help us improve the way we do our work, as well as the way we communicate with.
Well, you mentioned retail.
Workers and our growing remote. The smartphone is a very strong driver around the way we use our communications to communicate with our workforce.
Okay, thanks. You mentioned retail, and I'd like to talk a little bit more about that if we could. So many different mobile trends intersect within retail: mobile payments, smart devices on the shelves that let you know when it's time to restock. And of course, retailers have their own internal Wi-Fi systems, which tend to be somewhat customer facing in some cases. So I'm interested in any trends that you might see on the horizon for retail in 2016.
Yeah, you're going to find that retailers are becoming much more savvy to separate their networks, so their point of sale transactions have to be secure. There's a whole movement around using your mobile devices to pay, and then also mobile point of sale. Having that Wi-Fi connectivity completely separate from the Wi-Fi network that might be used by your customers and to improve the customer experience. We're also finding everyday organizations are looking to implement Wi-Fi and to use that Wi-Fi connectivity not only for their own internal staff, but for customers that might be in a waiting area or in the front part of the office. So it's definitely becoming more common.
And then what about integrating that Wi-Fi with the cellular network? Do you hear much about that?
Yeah, I think that you're going to find, there are a number of technology providers out there that have equipment and modems and routers that have multifaceted interfaces where they're also becoming smarter, right? They're going to choose the best network to operate on. If it's a secure transaction or it's something that maybe is HIPAA compliant, then it'll know to implement the security mechanisms that will be required to meet those security standards. On the other hand, there are routers like one big vendor that we work with is Cradlepoint. They have a router that you can plug in essentially AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile, and it'll make sure to connect to that network that is actually the best at that point in time. And it will allow to go back and forth between a cellular and Wi-Fi network depending on what you're doing with that particular communication, whether it's data or voice or content or media, etc.
So if I'm a Sprint customer and I am on that network, is that transparent to me? It switches back and forth between Sprint and the Wi-Fi network without me doing anything, or does the user have to input something?
Yeah, it's something that's on the back end, so the customer or the customer experience wouldn't have any indication as to what network that might be running on. It's usually an IT decision that the IT managers and those that are managing that equipment are more aware of what might work and what might work in different geographic locations or areas. This is more of something that you see with kiosks and ATM machines and those systems that might be remote, where they require multi-level connectivity and multiple options for connectivity.
Okay, great. Well, getting back to the connected workforce, we hear a lot about the Internet of Things empowering workers, but we also hear about technology in some cases replacing workers. And I'd like to get your perspective for the year ahead. Do you think that we'll see areas where technology will replace some jobs that are currently done by people?
Yeah, I think that we're seeing that today. I mean, and all that means to our workforce is that we need to become smarter, and we need to transition to other roles that might enable, that automation or maybe that robotics technology. So I think, for our, generation Y and Z coming into the workforce, it's just going to be a common theme for them to look at areas where they might best fit into the corporate world. And while we might see some of these jobs being replaced by automation and sensor technology and the Internet of Things, we'll also see a host of new careers and new jobs that are going to be prevalent in the workforce that will be all directed around managing those devices, securing those devices, the analytics side of the data and being able to process that information and use it into actionable and predictable manners. That's an area where, from a corporate workforce perspective, that's where the younger generation of workers, really can lend themselves to kind of transition to that area. If I was a younger, worker, that's where I would want to be looking at in terms of the new career opportunities.
So data analytics, what else? What are some of the other specific areas that you think that younger workers should be looking at?
Well, definitely, I think that our younger generation, especially those that are kind of looking at the whole STEM, science, technology, engineering, and those areas are really hot. I think that the other areas are really focused around programming. I think that all our younger generation, especially Generation Z, will have a strong foundation of code, in their background, and being able to come in and interface with software and other applications, either in a mobile environment or other environments. So, 10 years from now, the interface that we see today might even be more interactive, where we're playing with a game or we're kind of in a gaming world, but we're actually in the middle of programming something that might be relevant to the workplace. So it's going to be an interesting way in terms of how we learn and how we interface with the mobile device and applications that are being developed.
Absolutely, it is. It does seem like a lot of the people that are coming into the workforce now may have picked up some Java skills just because they are a mobile first generation. Is this the programming language that you think is important, or if someone is looking at programming from a vocational perspective, what are the programming languages that people should be focusing on learning?
Yeah, I mean, I think it changes so much. I mean, every year, there's a whole host. So I think that every young programmer is going to be kind of up to date as to what's out there. And I think also, connecting with the technology vendors and understanding, when they're hiring, what are some of the more prevalent applications and software and programming languages that they're looking for. And then also staying on top of, what's out there. We were, a year ago, we were talking about HTML5 and there's just a whole host of changes that are happening on a day-to-day basis. So I think it's probably more important to look at maybe what's on the horizon and to look at what companies today and corporations today are using and starting to look at in terms of application and software development. I think no matter what, at the end of the day, everything will be very much digital driven and mobile driven. So the languages that are moving into that mobile device and making that customer experience more user friendly and using that software to enable the customer in a more prominent manner and a more interactive manner. And that's I think going to be the driving factor around what programming languages are going to be out there. But I think Java definitely is something that we've seen big this year. There are a whole host of others that it's definitely not my background, but it's an area I would say if I was a younger generation programmer or coder, I would stay on top of that closely.
Absolutely. And what can those of us that have been in the workforce for a while learn from the generation that's coming in?
I think it's very interesting to see how the younger generation of, just think about our students, and the younger professionals. When they communicate over chat. It's very short, succinct communications. The way we collaborate may be very different than the way they collaborate, especially Generation Z coming into the workforce. We may not even see that particular workforce even using a laptop at all. So I think that it's going to be interesting to see. I think it's the way they communicate today, the way they communicate with their friends, through social media, through the applications that they use today. All of those are driving factors in terms of how they will work in the future and once they enter into the workforce. You rewind it back 5 years ago when the iPhone and really started hitting the market and AT&T was the exclusive provider. There was a big push from young medical and healthcare workers and clinicians that were entering into the market. And it was one of those things where the medical industry wasn't ready to adopt and implement smartphone technology, and it was happening with or without them. So they were really having to play catch up in terms of securing those devices and figuring out what do we do with the wealth of young medical workers that are using these devices for work purposes, whether we like it or not. And I think that we'll continue to see that with some of the applications and tools that they use today. So staying on top of that younger generation is going to be very important for those that are looking to hire, those younger skilled workforce.
Right. Yeah. Your point about the healthcare profession brings up an interesting side issue, which is the data that's generated on all these mobile devices. If your doctor takes a picture with his or her smartphone because that's what's available, then whose property is that picture? It's your medical data, but it's on the doctor's smartphone right there with the pictures of his or her kids. Whose data is that?
It's interesting. I think that you're going to find some of these things pan out on a case-by-case basis. I know that one of the things that we talked about was, once you log into a VPN, whether you use your personal device or you're using a corporate device, that data is running over that corporate network. That company has access to that data. That company can go through and look at that data, whether they're monitoring that data for security purposes or scanning that material or that data for, looking for spam and other potential viruses to protect, the company. That's an important factor. I think we'll also start to see a whole host of regulatory and standards that will enter into kind of the workforce around mobile data. Specifically, we're really driving a lot of our communications around content that's online or in a mobile environment. And if we're using those same tools for workplace reasons or in the workforce, then we're definitely going to have a way of understanding who owns the data. And you will see, legal cases and things that'll enter into the market to start to figure out what's what. But it's a very gray area right now, and it's not really consistent industry to industry. Some industries are a little bit more prepared than others.
Are there any areas that companies need to be aware of in terms of liability? Have you seen any companies get caught in a bad position because they didn't realize that they had exposed themselves somehow?
No, I think that companies today, especially with all the notable hacking instances that have been in the news and the media, they're becoming much more aware that they have to have not only a security plan in place, but they need to have it not just on their network, but they need to have it with their mobile devices. They need to have it for any of their connected machines or any automated systems and operations that might be in place. One of the things that we're working on right now is a project with the Continental Automated Building Association around the intelligent building. And you'd be surprised at how many systems that are attached to that network that are communicating. Maybe it's pinging it daily or hourly, but that kind of information needs to be secure and needs to be encrypted. Hackers can get into pretty much anything that's kind of connected on a network or running over the internet. So I think we're becoming smarter, and I think that corporations are seeing the seriousness of it because of legal repercussions that may come if they're not securing the data, especially if it's something that is customer facing, or, for example, in a medical facility that might be patient facing that's HIPAA compliant.
That's right. That's right. Okay, great, Stephanie. Thank you. Are there any other connected workforce topics that you'd like to be sure we address here today?
Well, I think, one of the areas that might be important is, looking above and beyond. Where are we going? What are some of the major devices that we're going to see enter into the workforce? Smartphones are becoming such a commodity in today's workforce. We're going to see wearables enter into the workforce. They have been in use. We've seen a lot of trials and cases where they're being used for corporate health and wellness. In some of the industrial or more ruggedized industries, we're already seeing those devices being used for other, workplace purposes. So that's an area that I think will be interesting. I think the whole Internet of Things, whether you're talking about industrial Internet of Things or consumer-facing products, this year, 2016 will be the year for smart cities. We're going to see a flourish of major contracts and partnerships in areas around making our cities smarter, whether it's intelligent transportation or connecting our utility system or our lighting, and using that network across different systems and different departments within a state or local entity. And then lastly, I think this year has been the year of the connected vehicle, or the whole automotive industry has been a very big area of discussion. I think we'll start to see the Internet of Things really enter into a whole nother realm in different industries and manufacturing, the industrial sector, agricultural sector. So that's what I'm looking forward to, in terms of 2016. I think you'll also see is that 2016 will be the year to focus on the customer experience. IoT will move into the customer experience. How are we using this great automation and sensor technology to enhance our customers and to provide better customer service? So this year will be 2016 will be a big year to focus on the customer experience.
All right, great. Stephanie Atkinson, CEO and founder of Compass Intelligence. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Martha.